Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Omelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
We defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade, and they're going to come from India.
Downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside first.
The upsides are absolutely enormous. The potential uses of this are almost unlimited.
I only discovered AutoGPTs about a week ago and started writing about them. And after I started writing about them, Jeff Bezos followed me on Twitter and all kinds of...
Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight. The war in West Asia rages on. The death toll is rising on both sides. Devastation and human suffering are being seen on both sides. With every airstrike, every killing, every combative statement, hopes of an immediate ceasefire are fading away. On Gravitas tonight, we continue to bring you stories from the war. Our correspondent Jody Cohen gets us live updates from the battlefield while dodging Hamas rockets. We'll also try and find out what led to this intel failure. How did no one see Hamas coming? Especially America. Was American intel snoozing? Meanwhile, Israel is pounding Gaza as sirens blaze through its own cities. Hospitals in Gaza are overwhelmed. Israeli hostages, what about them? We don't know. They are still in the hands of Hamas. Stay with me tonight. We'll get you the latest. We start the show with news that's breaking now. Here are 4 big developments. 1. Hamas has struck the Israeli city of Ashkelon. This happened a few years back. The group warned Israelis to leave the city, and then the attack happened. This city is located in southern Israel, just a few miles away from the Gaza Strip. Hamas fired a barrage of rockets on the city. Reports say more attacks could follow soon. Development number 2. Israeli forces have rained rockets on Gaza City. The rockets struck a port in the city as boats nearby caught fire. There's no word yet on the casualties. We're awaiting more details. Development number 3. Egyptian trucks carrying vital aid and fuel to the Gaza Strip have been forced to retreat. Why? Because Israel has warned Cairo that these trucks would be bombed. That they would be bombed if they brought any relief supplies into the Gaza Strip. Development number 4. US President Joe Biden dialed Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu a while back. This was their third phone call since Hamas's attack. Reports say the two leaders discuss ways to deter hostile actors from exploiting the war. They also discuss a supply of defense aid to Israel. You've seen Jody Cohen report for us from a bomb shelter as rockets rain down. She's with me again tonight, live from Renana. Jody, how are you today? How's your family?
We're doing well, thank you. We've been in and out of the bomb shelter this afternoon in central Israel. There have been even more rocket attacks from Hamas in Gaza into southern Israel. 2 foreign workers were killed and 1 is seriously injured. And this evening there was a huge barrage of rocket fire into Ashkelon. Haifa Hospital in the north of the country has been told to prepare in the case of a war in the north, and there have now been rockets fired into the north as well. I'm actually at a blood donation drive in Renana where there's been thousands of people across... Sorry, I thought that was a rocket siren. It's a plane overhead. There's been thousands of people across the country who have gone to donate blood, standing for hours in line. We're hearing of 1,500 people in Tel Aviv, 1,000 people here in Renana. They're actually having to turn people away. There was a huge crowd at the gates just before, and they had to turn lots of people away because people are wanting to donate their blood. Another thing we're hearing is, as well as the communities rallying and trying to volunteer and send supplies to the people down south in the communities stuck there, we're also hearing about news of a potential unity government, which we've been talking about, Priyanka, haven't we, yesterday? But the coalition party heads have said that they would back an emergency unity government. That's been done in past times of war, and we're expecting an announcement from Benny Gantz, the head of one of the opposition parties, soon on that.
Right, Jody. In fact, as we speak, we can hear sirens blaring in Israel as of now. Tell us about the situation in the country. We're also getting reports that schools and businesses have been ordered to shut down.
Yes, schools have gone back to COVID distance learning. This afternoon we heard of atrocities in Kfar Aza where the fighting was going on until this morning. 70 civilians were killed there, including 40 babies, some of whom were decapitated. Seeing horrific news coming from there. An ID officer has said it's not a war or a battlefield, it's a massacre. And Israel's coordinator with the Palestinian territories has criticised the residents there, saying instead of being appalled, residents of Gaza are celebrating. We've also heard some sad news. I spoke to a man an Irish man whose cousin had been missing since Saturday earlier today, and he had been calling on the Irish government to get involved. And it's just been confirmed that he has been found murdered. We've had some good news. 30 people who were in hiding since Saturday, they have been found alive. They were all at the peace party in the desert where 260 young people were killed.
Right, Jody, we're seeing the death toll rise. Now, I think the next big question is, what is the current condition of the hostages? Hamas, as we know, has put out an open threat.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't know too much information. There were 4 families from the United States who, this afternoon, they called on President Biden to get involved in the release of the hostages. Mansour Abbas, who is the head of the Israeli Islamist Ram Party, he urged Hamas to at least release the women, children and elderly hostages. Hamas has said that they're going to film the execution of hostages for any Israeli strike that's carried out without prior warning. And they said that they're not going to talk about any prisoner or hostage exchange before the end of the war.
Right. Tell us a little bit about life in Israel at the moment, Jody. We know, as you just mentioned, schools have gone to distance learning, businesses have been ordered to shut down, and sirens are going off as rockets are fired from Gaza.
Yeah. So people aren't really going out so much. The shops are not open. Only the essential services of shops are open, like doctors, pharmacies, food shops. So just the essentials are open. There have been some volunteers who've been collecting packages for people down south, and some have been going down south, but they've been told to stop that because at the moment it's too dangerous. There's also, we know that there have been further attempts at infiltration from Gaza, from Hamas in Gaza on Tuesday, and these were all unsuccessful. And also on Monday we saw attempts at infiltration from Hamas in the south and from Islamic Jihad in the north, and that's the first time that they had attempted that. The communities are worried in case, they can get access through any tunnels, but the security services say that they've secured the borders. We know that at least 1,500 Hamas gunmen had crossed over the border, and they've now been killed by the Israel Defense Forces. But more are expected to be in hiding around Israel, so it's a very tense time.
Right, Jody Cohen, thank you so much for all those updates, and thanks for reporting for us from the battlefield. Now, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement on the Israel-Hamas crisis is clear. The people of India stand by Israel. Prime Minister Modi expressed his support for Israel during a call with his counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu amid reports of Hamas rocket strikes on Israeli cities. Prime Minister Modi has expressed deep shock. He has pledged solidarity with Israel at this difficult time. Even though the violence in Israel has sharply divided people, with one camp slamming the terrorist attack and the other questioning Israel's actions in Palestine, India has expressed a clear message of support. New Delhi stands with Israel. This is significant, and tonight I will tell you how and why. First and foremost, let's make this clear. India's support for Israel is based on its stance against terrorism. India strongly and unequivocally condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. These words highlight the firm stance of the Indian government. It's a stance that Prime Minister Modi reiterated after his call with Netanyahu. During this call, Prime Minister Modi received a comprehensive briefing on the ongoing situation. Now remember, India places anti-terrorism at the forefront of the global agenda. In fact, India has been advocating for counter-terrorism efforts in various forums. This includes the Quad, the SCO, BRICS, and many others. The gravity of Hamas's attack on Israel cannot be ignored. It's a threat that extends far beyond regional borders, and it's a threat that India recognizes as a menace to peace and security. But remember, condemning terrorism and the attack on Israel is also of utmost importance for India's own national security interests. India understands that addressing terrorism on a global scale is not just a responsibility, it's a necessity. New Delhi's reaction isn't merely symbolic, it reflects the strategic and military ties between Israel and India. These two countries are not just allies, they are partners in important endeavors. They stand alongside the US and the UAE in the I2U2 infrastructure. It underlines their commitment to the region's stability and security. Also remember, defense is a cornerstone of the India-Israel bilateral relationship. In fact, India holds a distinguished position of being the largest single customer for Israeli weapon systems. Once ties were upgraded in 1992, the trajectory of defense and trade ties between the two sides took off at a breakneck pace. Israel rapidly rose to become India's second largest defense partner. Israel is among India's most reliable weapon suppliers, a supplier that puts no political preconditions. This was evident during the 1999 Kargil War. At the time, Israel supplied weapons and surveillance systems and upgraded existing military hardware during the war. After Prime Minister Modi's election in 2014, ties improved dramatically. In 2017, Prime Minister Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister ever to visit Israel. This marked a major milestone, underlining the importance of this partnership. Today, the relationship spans from tourism, agriculture to defense. According to India's Ministry of External Affairs, this is a strong high-tech partnership aligning with the aspirations of the two knowledge economies. But it's not just about trade and defense. Political ties are also friendly. Let's not forget, India has traditionally supported the Palestinian cause too. While Prime Minister Modi made a historic visit to Israel, he also achieved a de-hyphenation of ties. In 2018, he separately visited Palestine, underscoring India's commitment to a balanced approach. India even hosted the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, in New Delhi during the same year. The Indian Prime Minister has skillfully balanced India's ties with Israel and Palestine. India consistently has voiced its support for a negotiated solution for lasting peace between the two. It has endorsed this even at the United Nations. You see, the deep divisions within Palestine have also become more apparent with the Palestine Authority in Ramallah and the Hamas in Gaza. So support for the Palestinian cause must not be confused with Hamas's terror. While India continues to support the Palestinian cause, it has also strengthened its strategic ties with Israel. India has experienced firsthand the devastating impacts of attacks by terrorist groups, so it understands Israel's security concerns. At the end of the day, India has consistently advocated for peace. It envisions a West Asia characterized by sustainable, long-lasting peace. This vision isn't merely a dream, it's a reflection of India's commitment to global stability and its willingness to play a constructive role in achieving that. Time now to tell you what's happening on ground. It's day 4 of the Israel-Hamas war, and if we go by the images, the terrifying images, things don't look good at all. The damages are huge, the casualties enormous. Look at these images. They're from a morgue in Gaza. It's packed with bodies of those killed as people try to identify their family members. Look at this video now. It's from the small Israeli community of Be'eri. Rescue workers have retrieved over 100 bodies here. I repeat, over 100. These people were killed after Hamas gunmen attacked the area on Saturday.
We saw, was unbelievable, the casualties that we saw, and then we thought that we saw everything, but then it came to yesterday when we went into Kibbutz Be'eri and we saw what was done to the families, to the children. That was, I'm 33 years in this position, and I was everything. I saw everything. I thought I saw everything, but something like that I never saw.
This next video is from Gaza City. It shows the moment a distraught nurse discovered that her husband, who was also a medic, has died. She steps out of the hospital. She starts screaming, "My husband has been martyred."
استشهد يا جماعة. في المستشفى استشهد يا جماعة. جوزي أنا بشتغل هان مع المصابين وجوزي استشهد. يا جماعة جوزي استشهد. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. يا رب عليهم. يا رب أقدر.
Look at this video now. It's from Niram. It shows the Israeli border police trying to evacuate wounded soldiers as Palestinian gunmen rain bullets on them. This next video is also from Gaza City. It shows the aftermath of Israeli strikes. An entire neighborhood reduced to ashes with plumes of smoke rising from buildings. The next video is from Tel Aviv. It shows long lines at a supermarket as Israelis rush to hoard supplies, fearing shortages in the days ahead. What do these images tell you? That there's devastation on both sides, there's fear on both sides. Hamas may have started this war, Israel may just be retaliating, but it is the people who are suffering, people who have nothing to do with this war. They are paying the biggest price in this battle. If we speak of the numbers on the Israeli side, the death toll has climbed to more than 1,000 last we checked. The number of injured has risen to 3,400. On the Palestinian side, the death toll has risen to 770. The injuries stand at above 4,000. And it's not just the Israelis and Palestinians. There are a number of foreign nationals who have died or are missing or have been taken hostage. Here's what we know so far. From Thailand, 12 people have died, 11 have been taken hostage. From the United States, 11 have died, scores are still missing. From Nepal, 10 people have died. From Argentina, 4 have died and 5 are missing. From Ukraine, 2 people have died. From France, 2 people have died, 14 are missing. From Russia, 1 person has died, 4 are missing. From the UK, 1 person has died, 1 other is missing. From Canada, 1 person is reportedly dead, 2 are missing. From Cambodia, 1 person has died. From Brazil, 3 people are missing. From Italy, Tanzania, Paraguay, 2 people are missing. From Mexico and Colombia, 2 people have been taken hostage. From Panama and Ireland, 1 person each is missing. Last we checked, Qatar was negotiating with Hamas to secure the release of the hostages. Other countries too are making efforts to track their citizens who have gone missing. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has also stepped in. Reports say that MBS has spoken to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The two apparently discussed working on a solution to prevent the expansion of the conflict. That said, the Crown Prince has also reiterated that Saudi Arabia continues to stand by the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, is saying that it has more or less restored full control over its border fence with Gaza. It has deployed troop carriers, tanks, military armored bulldozers, and installed more fences at the border. The IDF has also expanded the mobilization of reservists to 360,000. Additionally, the IDF says that it has killed Hamas's Minister of Economy. His name was Jawad Abu Shamala. He managed the finances of the group and the flow of funds from abroad. On Monday night, he was reportedly killed in an airstrike.
The
IDF is in full control of the areas around Gaza. There has been no infiltration of terrorists on the border with Gaza since last night. There are isolated incidents where we encountered terrorists that dug in the field between the tens of thousands of fighters that are operating in the area.
As the IDF secures Israel's borders, it is also telling Gazans to flee if they want to escape the strikes. The question is, where will they go? To Egypt, says the IDF. It has asked the people of Gaza to leave through the Rafah crossing, and last we checked, even the Rafah crossing had been shut. The IDF also deployed its tanks near the Lebanon border. This has been done due to fears that the conflict could expand, that Hezbollah from Lebanon could help Hamas. 3 Hezbollah fighters were killed on Monday. 1 Israeli officer was also killed in a raid. That was claimed by Palestinians in Lebanon. And lastly, back in Tel Aviv, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has called upon the country's opposition to form an emergency government, a government of national unity, to fight this war collectively. Listen in.
I call on the opposition leaders to form immediately an emergency union government without prior conditions.
So these were the biggest developments on day 3 of the war. The next 24 hours are critical. The Arab League is meeting on Wednesday. It will decide a plan of action on the war. Whatever the outcome be, we can be sure of one thing. We are entering a new era of hard power politics, with countries across the world rethinking their strategy and beginning to take sides in this war. As we move on, I have a horrifying clip for you. It was released by Hamas. You have to see it for yourself.
ومن هذه الساعة
From this moment we announce that for every attack towards our people who are safe in their homes, without previous warning, unfortunately, we will have to execute one of the civilian enemy captives that we have hostage. And we will be forced to broadcast this in video and audio. We announce this decision and we hold the responsibility in front of the whole world to the Zionist enemy and its leadership. They are responsible for this decision.
This is how ugly the situation has become. For every attack, one civilian hostage will be killed. That is what Hamas has threatened. What looked very unlikely till yesterday has now become the reality of today. Hamas has threatened to kill hostages. It is treating them like pawns, like insurance against attacks. For every attack from Israel, it says it will kill a hostage and broadcast it. Yes, it will broadcast it with video and audio. Let me remind you, at least 150 Israelis have been taken hostage by Hamas. And it's not just the Israelis. People of 6 to 8 other nationalities have also been kidnapped. This includes 2 Mexicans, 3 Brazilians, at least 1 student from Nepal and at least 1 British national. Reports say German citizens have also been kidnapped along with at least 11 Thai nationals. There are also reports of French and Canadian hostages. You see, Israel is currently in an unprecedented hostage crisis. And what is Prime Minister Netanyahu going to do about it? The mood on ground is of anger. There is a rising demand for justice and revenge. Netanyahu has threatened Hamas that Israel is just getting started. He has called up 300,000 reservists and counting. This has happened before, but never in a span of just 2 days. Everything is pointing at a ground offensive. But given the hostage crisis, can Israel afford to do that? A ground offensive is risky. Hundreds of hostages are spread across just 25 miles of land in Palestine. Wherever an airstrike will land, it is likely to hit an innocent civilian. But then again, civilians have become just collateral damage in this war. There are no barriers on butchering innocent lives from both sides. Meanwhile, Qatar is in talks with Hamas for a prisoner swap. The mediators are negotiating freedom of Israeli women and children. In exchange, they are offering to release 36 Palestinian women and children from both Israeli prisons. So, will Netanyahu consider doing the same? Will it cut a deal with Hamas to rescue its hostages? We at this point will just pray for their safe return. Now, for more analysis, we are now being joined by Jonah Blanc, who is a senior political scientist at RAND from Washington, D.C. He is also the former foreign policy advisor to President Joe Biden. Jonah, welcome to WION.
Thank you for having me.
I want your assessment of this ongoing war. What happened? How did no one see this coming? How did no one see Hamas coming?
Well, that is a question that no one has answered satisfactorily yet. Former top generals in the Israeli military and former top officials of the Israeli intelligence services have been warning for months that the ongoing political crisis in Israel, before any of the war in Gaza, was weakening Israel's defensive posture. We don't know yet whether that was directly responsible for this clear intelligence failure, but I don't think anyone can say that that Israel has in any way prepared for an attack that was very, very coordinated and very, very sophisticated and tremendously tragic and absolutely inexcusable.
Now let's talk about the hostage crisis, unprecedented hostage crisis for Israel. Negotiations are on to release Israeli hostages, as we are given to understand, but a big threat, an ominous threat rather, coming from Hamas, which is terrifying. When will these hostages return safely, in your assessment?
Well, we all hope that they will return safely as soon as possible, but let's not undersell the real threat that we see right here. Hamas, as we've seen in the past few days and in the decade and a half earlier, we've seen that Hamas is very willing to engage in horrific acts to achieve what it considers to be its aims. Now, its aims have never really succeeded in advancing the cause of safety and peace for the Palestinian people, let alone the people of Gaza. Will they actually start executing hostages? They may, and Israel is very aware of it and has dealt with this before. But let's be aware, we've seen horrific bloodshed on both sides, and we're going to see a lot more on both sides before this is over.
Right, Jonah, I'm just going to repeat your statement. You're saying that Hamas at this point is very willing to commit to these horrific acts. I think another obvious question that everybody is asking is who funds Hamas? Where is it getting its weaponry from?
Well, we know that Hamas has historically been supported by Iran, in addition to other outside players, but most noteworthy Iran. We've heard a lot of reporting about Iran's support for this particular action. As far as I know, we don't have actual proof of it yet, but it would be naive to think that Iran was not involved in the planning or at least provision of material support for it.
Right. My final question, Jonah, do you see any immediate hope of a ceasefire?
Sadly, I don't. In my view, Israel has very little option other than to take on Hamas and to respond militarily. And as we've seen before in so many places in so many countries, a committed terrorist group holding hostages is a nightmare situation.
Right, Jonah, thank you so much for all your analysis. Thanks for joining us on Gravitas tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now this begs the next question. Did Israel ignore vital intelligence from Egypt? Did Israel's security agencies underestimate Cairo's repeated warnings? As the world watches the Israel-Hamas war, a senior Egyptian intelligence officer has made a startling revelation. He claims that Jerusalem ignored multiple warnings on a potential Hamas strike. Amid questions around Israel's intelligence failure, Egyptian intelligence official reveals startling details. The Egyptian official says that Jerusalem ignored repeated warnings that the Gaza-based terror group was planning something big. These warnings reportedly included an apparent direct notice from Cairo's intelligence minister to the Prime Minister. Yes, you heard that right. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was allegedly informed. The Egyptian official claims that Cairo, which often serves as a mediator between Israel and Hamas, had spoken repeatedly and warned the Israelis. The Egyptian official further says that Israeli officials were so focused on West Bank that they played down the threat from Gaza. He told the Associated Press, and I quote, "We have warned them that an explosion of the situation is coming, and very soon it would be big, but they underestimated such warnings." In one of these stark warnings, Egypt's intelligence minister, General Abbas Kamel, reportedly made a personal call to Netanyahu just 10 days before this massive attack. He reportedly cautioned that Hamas was likely planning something unusual. The unnamed Egyptian official said that they were taken aback by Jerusalem's seeming indifference to the news. The Israeli Prime Minister allegedly brushed aside the minister's concerns, attributing the military's preoccupation with troubles in the West Bank instead. Shockingly and allegedly, Israel ignored the explicit warnings from its allies. So did Netanyahu overlook Egypt's something big warning? Jerusalem says no. Netanyahu has denied receiving any such advance warning. He said in an address to the nation on Monday night that the story was fake news. Even the Israel Prime Minister's office stated on X, that is formerly Twitter, that the report to the effect that Prime Minister Netanyahu received a message in advance from Egypt is absolutely false. In Gaza, Palestinians live under the constant watch of drones, fortified borders, and a vigilant military presence. Remember that. And as hundreds of terrorists breach Israeli borders, Israel's once unbeatable intelligence apparatus appeared to crumble. This terrifying, audacious assault now casts a shadow of doubt over the very invincibility that Israeli intelligence agencies celebrated for the past triumphs. So we've got plenty of unanswered questions. How did it come down to this? How did Israel not see this coming? Who is at fault here? We say it is an intelligence failure. Mossad was blindsided by Hamas. But another big question is, what was the Central Intelligence Agency doing? Was the US intelligence also napping? It's supposed to work in close tandem with Israeli intelligence. US officials have said that if the Israelis knew that an attack was imminent, they did not share it with Washington. One senior US military official said that the CIA was not tracking this. But is it really that simple? There were attacks from air, land, from sea. More than 5,000 rockets were fired. So can the CIA just shrug off an assault of this level, of this magnitude? Can it afford to make such statements? Let me explain. When it comes to Russia, the CIA is doing everything it can to take down the Wagner Group, it says. At least that's what it's claiming. It has fought the likes of ISIS, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Al-Qaeda. But a terror group like Hamas caught the US intelligence off guard. How can that possibly be justified? US officials are adamant. They have outright refused to label the attack as an intel failure. In fact, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that no one saw the violence coming. I repeat, he says no one saw the violence coming. But wasn't it the CIA's job to know what was coming? What happened to America's satellite data? American leaders are currently saving face, saying that there will be enough time to investigate. But won't that be too little too late? What about the lives lost? What about the pain and suffering of thousands? If the US and Israeli intelligence had done their jobs, the mayhem, the destruction, the irreparable loss could have been prevented. In fact, last night on Gravitas, I spoke to Friedrich H. Fleitz from Washington, D.C. He is a CIA analyst, and listen to what he had to say.
I think that's the question everyone's asking right now. Obviously, American intelligence did not see it coming, but Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, has one of the best capabilities in the world, human sources in Gaza, electronic surveillance, and somehow Hamas was able to evade Israeli and American intelligence. And I think the way it did that was not just an understanding of the capabilities of these intelligence agencies, but Hamas had a great deal of help. I think the Iranians were working very closely with Hamas to plan for this operation and to also to teach Hamas operational security so preparations for this vicious attack would not be detected.
For some time now, the US has been employing a cautious diplomacy with Iran, the same Iran which has openly supported and armed Hamas. Even in the middle of a crisis, the US government sent some $43 million to the Islamic Republic. Iran has denied any involvement in the mutiny that has unfolded in Israel. And the United States is supporting the Iranian view. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that there is no indication of Iran's direct involvement, but that is not what the Hamas spokesperson has claimed. As per reports, Ghazi Hamad has said that Iran supported Hamas in launching its attack. So why is the US claiming otherwise? The vicious Hamas attack was Israel's 9/11. That's what the people of Israel say. Not simply because of chaos that has unfolded thereafter, but also in the blindness that preceded it. Americans never imagined that Al-Qaeda would fly airplanes into its buildings. Similarly, the US and Israeli intelligence couldn't predict that Hamas fighters could escape the barricaded compound of Gaza with paragliders. Did they underestimate their foe? Were they so blinded by the Abraham Accords that they couldn't see what was actually happening on the streets? Intelligence failures usually begin with overconfidence. They don't simply result from a lack of information, but also an inability to understand it. Both the United States and Israel knew about the hatred of Hamas, and yet they could not anticipate what was lurking in the shadows. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Lieutenant Colonel Mordechai Kiar from Tel Aviv. He's a former senior IDF military intelligence officer and an Israeli scholar of Arabic culture. Colonel, welcome to WION.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sir, we've seen the terror unfolding in Israel. How's the situation currently? We know rockets were fired from Gaza.
Yes, even one of them fell not far from my home. And we are at a war against the Iranian octopus, against the Palestinian tentacle of this octopus, And this actually is not only a Hamas organization, it is actually an ISIS-like organization, because what they did on Saturday morning to children, they slaughtered them. They opened pregnant women. You have no. They did so many atrocities, which definitely they are just like ISIS. Israel today is fighting an ISIS branch of the Palestinian issue, and Iran, as you proceeded, is behind it. The world today is watching us, especially the Arab world, the Islamic world, to see if the normal world, resembled by India, Israel, United States of America, Western Europe, will be defeated by the octopus of evil, as we saw on Saturday morning. Right. And the question is, who will win?
Right. You're asking the question, who will win? Are there any winners in this war, of course, is the big question as well. Do you see any hope of an immediate ceasefire at this point?
Ceasefire will be an Israeli surrender. Israel, I think, is on its march to get rid, or to rid the world from this plague named by force Hamas. It should be called ISIS. Israel is on its way to save the world from this kind of ISIS and its friends, from Beirut, from Tehran, from Qom. They are in Iraq, they are in Syria, they are in Yemen, and they are threatening the civilized world. The question is where is the rest of the world? Do the rest of the world understands the essence of this war, or the world is sleepwalking, not to see there's powers of evil which take the world country after country. We are not going to surrender to such an octopus of evil.
Colonel, just a final question there. Experts have called it, analysts have called this a very coordinated, vicious attack, which it is. How did the intel miss what was going to happen? How did no one see this coming?
Well, there were some Israelis who were warning about this. One of them is myself. I wrote these things, I copied these things, I recorded these things. But unfortunately, people here in this country were, I would say, a little bit drunk by the successes with the Abraham Accords, with the negotiations with Saudi Arabia, with our high tech, with our economy, with our thing. When we didn't notice that behind the corner there is a very big problem of a low tech. Look, they didn't only go with drones above the fence, above the barrier. They actually took a very low tech. They took a tractor. They took a bulldozer in order to flatten these fences and to run. And not only in one place. If it was in one place, we could do something. If it was two places, yes. But they crossed the fence in no less than 20 places. And Israel did not predict this scenario. And this is the scenario which the idea came from the Iranians. Not only this, the Iranians have a much worse scenario, to unite all the fronts against Israel. Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, in addition to Iran, everyone, there are Iranian militias, and militias are not bound by international law, by international rules of engagement, because they are militias. And this is what Iran did in all these countries. And these militias do whatever they like, to whoever they like, whenever they like, and they do whatever they like. And the world does not give Iran the bill for devastating so many countries here in this area, and they want now to devastate us. Right. We will resist.
Right. Colonel, thanks for speaking to us on WION. We would also like to tell our viewers at this point that Iran has denied being behind this attack. Now let's move on.
And you believe them?
Is Israel using white phosphorus in the Gaza Strip? Because a video has emerged. It apparently shows the alleged use of this incendiary weapon, a banned weapon in the densely populated Gaza. Before we proceed further, let's be clear, we cannot confirm the authenticity of these videos from the battleground. And so it is not known if the video was indeed shot in Gaza and if it was in fact a recent video. But why is this a big cause of concern? What are incendiary weapons? Why are they banned? What is white phosphorus? It is a waxy yellowish chemical with a pungent odor. It is a highly combustible chemical that burns quickly and brightly when exposed to air. It is used in incendiary weapons by militaries around the world for a variety of reasons, such as illuminating targets at night or to just inflict heavy damage. It is also very difficult to put out. You see, it clings to surfaces including skin and clothes, and so it is extremely dangerous. It can cause severe burns, even down to the bone. Now, if that's not shocking enough, those who come into contact with white phosphorus also suffer from respiratory damage, infection, and organ failure. These dangers make dropping them on civilian areas a war crime. So what are international rules? The use of white phosphorus in conflicts raises serious ethical as well as legal concerns. Now, while white phosphorus itself might not be officially classified as a chemical weapon, its fiery, incendiary nature has prompted the world to take action. It is subject to regulations outlined in Protocol 3 to the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. This protocol, signed in Geneva in 1980 and enforced since 1983, lays down the law. It puts limits on the use of incendiary weapons, and that includes those containing white phosphorus. The protocol has 115 state parties, including countries such as France, the US, Russia, and Ukraine. The goal? To minimize the suffering caused by these lethal weapons. This protocol prohibits using them on civilians. Not just that, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, in effect since 2002, also provides a definition of war crimes. It prohibits actions such as the destruction of property not justified by military necessity and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population or civilian objects. Thus, violations of this protocol may constitute war crimes if proven. We have been talking about the war in Israel, but what about the one in Europe? I hope you haven't forgotten about the Ukraine war. But that's exactly what Russian President Putin would want, for the focus to shift, to divert the West's support and attention away from Ukraine. Has the war in Israel become a deflection that suits Putin? The Hamas attacks on Israel came on Vladimir Putin's birthday, and they were nothing less than a gift for him. Hamas attacks on Israel will reduce the US focus on Ukraine. Russia is set to exploit the chaos. All eyes were on Israel and Palestine. Russia launched 36 attack drones against southern Ukraine overnight. The strikes targeted Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson. They destroyed infrastructure, but there were no casualties. And guess who had supplied those drones? Iran. Well, there's nothing new about it, but the assault in Israel gives it a new context. Iran openly backs Hamas. The Kremlin has been tight with Iran, and now it may try to get even closer. Ukrainian President Zelensky is not happy. Listen to what he said.
За наявною інформацією дуже чіткою, Росія зацікавлена в розпаленні війни на Близькому Сході.
Based on available information, it is in Russia's interest to inflame war in West Asia in order to create a new source of pain and suffering that would weaken global unity, create divisions, and help Russia in undermining freedom in Europe. We witness how Moscow's Iranian allies openly lend support to those who attacked Israel. All of this poses a much greater threat than the world currently perceives.
You see, Zelensky is playing up how the Kremlin is friends with Iran. He has cast his war against Russia and the struggle against Hamas in the same light. Has he sensed the threat that the West might lose focus on Kyiv? The prospect cannot be ignored. The US has already pledged more support for Israel. It has also started delivering munitions and military equipment to its ally. Seeing the situation on ground, the demand for weapons from Israel is only going to increase. And about Ukraine, you already know how long Zelensky's wish list runs. The US now faces competing requests from Israel and Ukraine. Is it prepared to fulfill all these demands? The Pentagon says it is. The National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said, and I quote, "We are a large enough, big enough, economically viable and vibrant enough country to be able to support both." Well, that's all well and good on paper, but we'll have to see how it actually plays out on ground, on the battleground. Meanwhile, Europe isn't so sure-footed. According to reports, many European officials fear that their governments are already tapped out from Ukraine. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said his government is poised to provide diplomatic, intelligence or security support. That is, if Israel requests it. France, Germany and Italy have also promised support, but how much will they offer? Will it lead to frugality towards Ukraine? If yes, it will be to Russian President Putin's advantage. Russia began the biggest war in Europe in the last 75 years. Now, Hamas has followed suit in West Asia. This one is the worst in the last 50 years. And both wars can change the strategic landscape beyond recognition. We'll have to wait and watch. And that's a wrap on Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Je vous remercie.
We are one, you and I.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
A new drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
watch Gravitas.
And thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either